When I began this work 33 years ago, my wife at the time couldn't join me. We lived in New Jersey. And so the work was in Richmond, Virginia. And my wife couldn't join me right away as her mother was ill. And so Kay James was not only, as I said, not only my boss, but a mentor and a surrogate mother. And there are more than a few nights when I slept on her and Charles' sofa. And so I wanted each of you folks to have a bit of a flavor of where it is that I come from. This woman has had an unparalleled experience in developing and executing family policy in America. And so I thought that there was no better way to bring this effort to a close by sharing with you a vision from where this flows from. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you my friend, my colleague, my surrogate mother, Kay Coles James.
Wow. Thank you. I have had the opportunity to sit in the back of the room and sort of absorb a little of what was going on. And I am absolutely overwhelmed. Yes, this journey of ours started together over 30 years ago. I know I don't look to be that old. But I can tell you that as I enter this particular stage of my career, and yes, I say career, I think I've retired 4 times now, that it brings me great joy to see the baton passed to you, to see the passion that exists in this room for things that I have fought for, cared for so many years. And I want to thank the governor, and I want to thank your commissioner. Do you understand how blessed you are to have this man? His talent and leadership is recognized nationally, and yet you won the prize. I must confess that as Secretary of State in the Commonwealth of Virginia and having headed up Governor Glenn Youngkin's transition team, when I mentioned to him that I was coming here and that I was going to be speaking for my friend, he looked at me incredulously and said, "You know this guy? Why isn't he working for us? Why isn't he here in Virginia?" Well, I'm just excited that he is here and that he's not only a treasure for you here in Tennessee, but for all of us nationally. I want to thank the governor and the commissioner for taking on this difficult issue. Fatherhood is not an easy issue to talk about. Fatherlessness is not a comfortable conversation to have. And it isn't for a variety of reasons. It's a gutsy move to say we're going to take this issue on. Why? Well, it's very obvious to me that we're operating in a supercharged, volatile political environment characterized by all sorts of partisan bickering, volatile rhetoric, tribalism, indeed, and even a good idea, a good idea, one that has legs, one that will work, one that will improve human flourishing, won't get the recognition it deserves depending on who suggests it. And so I think that there needs to be an entire cadre of people who say enough is enough. I'm here today to launch what I hope in Tennessee is a whole new brand of leadership. Having been involved in government and public policy now for over 40 years, I'm tired. Tired of the tribalism, tired of the rhetoric, tired of the bickering. You know what I want to do? I want to solve problems. I want to fix stuff. And as I tell my children, statistically, according to the actuarial tables, at 74 years old, I may have a good 15 years left. And y'all ain't gonna mess up none of them. And so without a lot of time to waste, I'm ready to get the, can you say BS? Okay, out of the way. And let's fix some stuff. And so, I don't care. I'm gonna say it again for the people in the back. I don't care if you are a Republican or a Democrat, liberal or conservative. I don't care. This issue is important enough for us to set all that aside and work together. It is important enough, and we've seen the evidence. You've heard the data here. You know it's overwhelming. You know the outcomes of what it looks like when we don't address this issue. The mental health concerns, the education outcomes, the lack of life skills that go undeveloped. And quite frankly, in my opinion, that and $1 will get you a coat. We saw it on full display in Philadelphia last night. What it looks like when we don't address this important issue. So you've spent 2.5 days, you've identified the problem. I heard you curate solutions, and I even saw you come up with action plans, and I heard you make a commitment about going forward. And so for me, there is hope, because having attended probably in my lifetime thousands of these kinds of conferences, the things I fear most is that we have a mountaintop experience. We get psyched up, excited, and then we go home and nothing happens and nothing changes. It's too important. We cannot do that. Thank you for having 5-week, 5-month, and 5-year action plans. But I wanted to share with you that this is far more than a public policy exercise for me. I'm here today to put a face on fatherlessness. I grew up without one. By almost any measure, my life has been quite successful. But I'm here to tell you that having lived my entire life without being able to sit on his lap and say, Daddy. I heard the song, Daddy's Home. Do you know what it's like to grow up and never be able to look into a man's eye and say, Daddy? Knowing what it means to have a father When I was in college, my roommate was laughing and telling me a story about a young man that was trying to have his way with her in the back of a car seat and told her how beautiful she was. And she was able to look at him and say, I know, because my daddy told me so. To be able to know that there's a man in your life that provides that kind of security and comfort, to be able to call someone daddy or father. Having said that, I will also tell you that I admire greatly strong women. I took a lot of heat in Washington, particularly as president of the Heritage Foundation, when I was asked, who are some strong women that you admire? And I had the audacity to say Nancy Pelosi. And I do. Do you remember that iconic picture of Nancy Pelosi when she was standing in that room full of men and she stood and she had her finger like that? It was an iconic picture. If you are a woman, you understand what she had to go through to get to that position, to have that kind of authority. I don't have to agree with anything that she says in the area of public policy to admit that I admire that strong woman. But there's a strong woman that I admire even more than Nancy Pelosi. And it's a woman called Sue Coles. That's my mom. My mom was a single mother who raised 6 children without a father in the home. And so you see, when I talk about this issue as a matter of public policy, I refuse to let any public policy maker denigrate single women who are trying to raise children. I get it. I get it. Not only did Sue Coles raise 6 children, 5 of them were boys. I was the only girl. Can you imagine living in the public housing projects and trying to raise 6 children without a father? There is a reason that I am looking for public policy solutions for these very important problems. It's because I have the image ingrained in my head. And I understand why a father, let me tell you something, we have to have a good knowledge and understanding of what it would take to make a man with 6 kids leave his family. And as I grew older and I learned the story of my family, and I came to understand the obstacles that were in the way for my father, I was able to forgive him and able to understand why. My mother and father were young students in college. She became pregnant. And in those days, you married. And my father sang opera, studied chemistry, and wanted to be a doctor. But in those days, those were not avenues that were particularly open to an African-American male. And when he had to drop out of college to support a family, can you imagine? I mean, I understand in my core what it means to have a dream deferred. And I think because of that, he turned to alcohol. He turned to despair. And his coping mechanism was to walk away. Not to excuse it, but to understand all of what went around him that caused him to walk away from his responsibilities. Before she passed, my mother told me of many parents' days when she went to school as the only parent for her children without a father there, and she was offended by those school teachers and public education administrators who tried to make her feel okay and tell her that she could do this and she didn't need a man in her life to be complete. Even my mother, with her limited education at that point, understood how stupid that was. She understood to the point that she recognized that her daughter was missing a father figure, that her sons needed individuals in their lives to help them navigate into manhood. And you see, when we take away an acknowledgement that both moms and dads are important in children's lives, then we take away solutions that can help children grow. So recognizing that while she didn't have a husband there, my mother was smart enough to incorporate uncles, coaches, pastors, neighbors, and friends. So you see, if we don't acknowledge that this is an important element in raising children, we can't even begin to compensate because we say it isn't necessary. My mother was not that stupid. And as a result of that, she raised 5 incredible sons. And 1 semi-incredible daughter. But it was with the help and the recognition that there was something missing that needed to be added. So I want to suggest to you as we leave this place that although this conference is hosted by a government entity, this is not a government problem to solve alone. Let me say it again for the people in the back. This is not a government problem to solve alone. But let's start there. Let's start in the policy arena. I came to understand as I began to work in the area of public policy years ago that we didn't end up in this mess because of some maniacal scheme. I didn't question the intentions of those who placed all of these obstacles and poor policy in our way. And I began to talk about the unintended consequences of our misguided compassion. We did not intend to put policies in place that would actually tear families apart and not build them, but we did. We wanted to be compassionate people that helped, but we didn't. And so what we see now is the unintended consequences of our misguided compassion. We really thought we were helping poor people. We really did. And I decided that as a policymaker, one of the tests that I would use would be whether or not I would institute public policy that I would not institute in my personal life. So what did that look like for me? Would I ever say to my daughter, sweetie, mommy and daddy love you? And as a result of our undying love for you, I want you to understand that no matter how many children you have, every time you have a child, we're going to give you more money. We're just going to, don't worry about it. Just bring them home and we will take care of them and we're going to give you more money. What if I said to my sons, sweetie, if you want to go out and have lots and lots of girlfriends and you father children, don't you worry about it. Because we will make sure that you don't have to be involved at all, and mommy and daddy are going to take care of it for you. Now, the implications of that are clear, and this is what I want you to understand. It's not the people that are the problem. Because if I implemented that policy in some of the richest counties in Tennessee, within a generation, those counties would see out-of-wedlock births skyrocketing, fathers not taking responsibility for their children. But when you put those policies in place, as we try to help poor people, we have seen the explosion of out-of-wedlock births, the explosion of fathers not taking responsibility for their children. And so I would encourage you that as we think about public policy, think about the implications, even in your deepest compassion and desire to help, what that would look like if you implemented that exact same policy in your own families. And then I would encourage you to know this fact. Data has shown us that when fathers bond with their children, particularly early, when we implement policies as a government that requires the father to be involved, a father will walk through fire to take care of his child. And we've seen it. We know that if you identify, which is why one of the reasons in Virginia we said you must identify the father early. I want that father standing in the neonatal unit looking through the glass saying, that's my baby right there. When you teach a father how to hold the child, how to change a diaper, when you connect that father to that child, you have created an unbreakable bond. And so we should not have any policy that disrupts that natural relationship. So the first thing that the government has to do is get out of the way and do no harm. That's all I want from the government people here. Get out of the way and do no harm. Do not implement policies that disrupt the natural flow of the relationships. For our corporate people here, you have a job to do. You have to recognize that this is a priority. And why does corporate America have a role in this? Because y'all making all the money and we need some of it back. So I need you to be funding these initiatives. I need you to recognize that if you want a workforce that understands what it means to show up on time and that work has value, you better be funding fatherhood initiatives. You should be supporting mentoring programs. You should be making sure that your corporate executives are being the role models that they can and should be in the community. See, back in the old days, during segregation, when I grew up, in the Black community, you had the doctors and the lawyers and the school teachers living next door to Skibo. We were all there in the community together. But as we began to become affluent, we moved out and left Skibo. So he no longer sees that man getting up and going to work every day. He no longer experiences that. But corporate America has a responsibility, and if you're a corporate executive, step up. Now I'm gonna leave preaching and go to meddling. The church. Well, if the church were being the church, none of this would be necessary. If the church talked about the responsibility, do you understand why? I mean, let that sink in for a minute. A pastor doesn't get it when he talks about Father God, when he tries to talk about the importance of having a Father in heaven, and half of the people are sitting there saying, Father? A father has not been in my house, and I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't understand why I need one. On another day and in another venue, and if you're a pastor and have a church, I'll come back and unpack all of this for you. But in this government forum, I'm going to leave it right there. But I will say you have a tremendous responsibility. Why aren't you holding the classes for the young men? Why aren't you welcoming them into the congregation without judgment? I do believe that if the church were being the church, 90% of the problem would be solved. That was straight from Jesus. Jesus dropped the mic. So the next, talking about the government responsibility, corporate America's responsibility, the church, let's talk about moms. I was at a conference one time talking about the state of Black men in America, and one woman shut the entire conference down because for 2 days we heard about Black men this and Black men that and Black men in jail and Black men. And one woman stood up and said, you do understand that every one of those Black men was raised by a Black woman. And she said, we have a responsibility as moms. And so I think we have to work with moms to help them understand why they can't cut men out of their children's lives, why the women need to be, why the men need to be there. And they have said more than once that in the Black community, we raise our daughters and love our sons. And we don't teach them, train them, hold them accountable to be men. And so moms, we have a job to do in raising the next generation of Black men, or white ones, or Hispanic, I don't care. Moms have a responsibility. And finally, the person who has the most to do in all of this are dads themselves. And, you know, I don't think that we have come alongside, offered support. We have been so judgmental. I told you from the beginning, it took me 30 years to process what my father must have gone through, what he must have suffered in order to walk away, but not to excuse his behavior at all, but to understand it. Not making excuses, but to understand it. And so we've got to work with our men, not to judge them, but to understand them and walk beside them. And so I sort of want to finish where I started. This is not an easy conversation to have. You've been here for 2 days. You've heard the stories. You've absorbed the data. You've processed creative solutions, and you've had a mountaintop experience. But for the sake of all of the young people like me, who never had the opportunity to look into a man's eyes and say, "Daddy," for all of the young people out there who don't know the security of having a father who will protect them, for all of those individuals who never had a dad that would fight for them, this is a conversation we must have. These are solutions that we have to implement. We have to leave this place determined that this is not the last of the conversation, that we will hold each other accountable for solutions. With extraordinary leadership like you have in your governor and your commissioner, I have great hope for Tennessee. But now, it's time to go to work. The future, not only of that one family, is hanging in the balance, but because of the role that the family plays in any civilization, the work that we do on rebuilding families, the work that we do on elevating fatherhood is important to the future of this nation. Thank you for all that you do.
As Kay makes her way out of the room, I want to share a story with you. And this goes back to 30 years ago. I was having a conversation with her, and I said to her I was really confused about sort of where I was philosophically. And I said, I don't know if I'm a conservative or what have you. And she said, young man, you should not be concerned with labels. She said, you are a solutionist. And that is what it is that we are doing and we are called to do. We are called to find a solution to the issue of fatherlessness in Tennessee. So folks, this brings us to the end of what for me has been a spirit-filled couple of days. I want to thank each and every one of you for your willingness to engage and commit. And I've just got to make a particular call outs here. So, folks, I get the privilege of standing here and making pronouncements and thinking great thoughts. A couple of years ago, I said that we had to focus on this issue of fatherlessness. And so I wanted the Department of Human Services to be a catalyst to bring Tennessee to this work. And I put that in the hands of a most amazing staff that asked me, many questions, but said, okay, Commissioner, we understand your vision, and we're going to make that happen. And so I want to say to that DHS staff today, thank you for making this come true. I am blessed to sit at the head of an amazing group of professionals who have not only a head for the work, but a heart for the work. You saw Sherelle Campbell's tweet up here this morning. That is the spirit that drives this organization every day. And just to share a little nugget with you. So I have a kitchen cabinet. And that kitchen cabinet is filled with 5 women like Sherelle and 2 men. And when we constituted it, I sent an email to the chief operating officer, my wife, and the 5 women on my kitchen cabinet. And I said, now I have all these women bossing me around. And the chief operating officer said, as it should be. So, but it is that kind of energy that drives this place every day. Folks, there's a saying in preparation for presentation that in presentation, you should tell folks what you're going to tell them. You should tell them that, and then you should tell them what you told them. Well, we told you up front that we were going to share with you the crisis of fatherlessness, and that we were going to organize ourselves on what we were going to do about it. And then through the course of the conference, that's what we told you. And so I come back with telling you what we told you. We told you that we have a crisis here. But we also have the volunteer state to address that crisis. And folks, please understand that this is not about the Department of Human Services doing this work. It's not about Bill Lee doing this work. It's not about Tennessee state government doing this work. It's about all of us. We are taking a whole of Tennessee approach to how we address this scourge of fatherlessness. We are going to make Tennessee the model of America for the importance of fathers in our society. And each and every one of you are going to be the disciples of us doing that. I tell you, I leave here today wishing each of you travel blessings and say, I think that we have created some significant work for ourselves. What is clear to me is that there's a thirst and an energy for this issue in Tennessee. Now we have to figure out how we are going to corral and sustain all that energy. But I promise you, after we take a nap, okay, because we do need to, after all we've done here, after we take a bit of a nap, okay, we're going to get up and start dealing with that issue. I promise you that this is the beginning, not the end. And I just need all of you to stand by, to hear about how we are going to move this issue forward. Thank you so very much for lending your time, talent, and treasure to an existential crisis in Tennessee and in America. And this crisis might be bigger than, no, it's not might. It is bigger than the Department of Human Services. It's bigger than Tennessee state government, but it ain't bigger than all of Tennessee, okay? Let's light this candle. Thank you so much. Everybody, please get home safe.